Chapter 1. The Discovery. I was supposed to be invisible. That's what 32 years of family dinners had taught me. Sit quietly, don't interrupt the important conversations, and definitely don't expect anyone to remember your birthday without 3 reminders. So when I stumbled into that tiny souvenir shop in Lisbon's Alfama district, jet-lagged and looking for a simple postcard to send my sister, the last thing I expected was to see my own face staring back at me from a rotating display rack. My hands trembled as I pulled the postcard closer. There I was, maybe 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, wearing that ridiculous yellow sundress Mom always said made me look like a buttercup. But this wasn't some family photo that had somehow ended up in Portuguese tourist merchandise. The postcard read, Menina Perdida de Lisboa, in elegant script with English text below. The Lost Girl of Lisbon, a true story of love and sacrifice. The elderly shopkeeper watched me with knowing eyes as I flipped the card over, my heart hammering against my ribs. The back told a story I'd never heard, about a little American girl who'd captured the hearts of Lisbon's residents during a summer visit, whose photograph had become a symbol of hope and resilience throughout the city. The girl who'd supposedly changed everything for one Portuguese family. That girl was me, and I had absolutely no memory of any of it. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Hope you're having fun on your little solo trip, dear. Try not to get lost like you always do. I stared at those words, then back at the postcard in my shaking hands. Lost. The irony wasn't lost on me. Apparently, I'd been lost long before I had even realized it. But as I stood there in that cramped shop, surrounded by the scent of old paper and tourist trinkets, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The desperate, consuming need to understand why my face was on a postcard in a city I barely remembered visiting, and why nobody in my family had ever thought to mention it. Chapter 2. Following the Trail. The shopkeeper, who introduced himself as Manuel, spoke broken English, but his eyes held decades of stories. When I showed him the postcard and pointed to myself, his weathered face broke into a smile so wide it made my chest ache with an emotion I couldn't name. Ah, menina, you're her. You are Elena's little buttercup. He clutched my hands with surprising strength, and I felt tears I didn't understand building behind my eyes. We always wondered what happened to you. Elena, she never stopped asking about you, even at the end. Elena. The name hit me like a physical blow, though I couldn't place why. Manuel disappeared into the back room and returned with a worn photo album, its leather cover cracked with age. Each page revealed more pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was missing. Me as a child laughing with an elderly Portuguese woman in various locations around Lisbon. Me helping her feed pigeons in Rocio Square. Me sleeping curled up against her on a park bench, both of us covered by her colorful shawl. Your avó Elena, Manuel explained, using the Portuguese word for grandmother. She was not your blood, but she loved you like her own neta. That summer, 24 years ago, you stayed with her while your parents, they had their, business to handle. My stomach dropped. Business to handle? I remembered that summer now. Not the woman or Lisbon, but the hushed arguments between my parents. The way they'd suddenly announced I was going on a special trip while they sorted some things out. I thought it was a vacation. Apparently, it had been something else entirely. Elena sold flowers near the cathedral. But that summer, with you, she said you taught her to smile again. Her husband had died the year before. She was so lonely. Then this little American angel appeared. I stared at a photo of myself braiding flowers into the woman's gray hair, both of us laughing at something outside the camera's view. The child in that picture looked genuinely happy, happier than I could remember being in years. Chapter 3. The First Twist. Back in my hotel room overlooking the Tagus River, I called my mother. My hands were still shaking as I held up the postcards to my laptop camera during our video call. "Mom, I need you to explain this to me, now." Her face went pale, and for the first time in my life, I watched my mother, the woman who never seemed rattled by anything, struggle for words. "Oh, honey, that's just a silly tourist thing. You know how they romanticize everything in Europe. It probably isn't even you." "It's me, Mom. The shopkeeper remembered me. He knew about Elena." I watched her flinch at the name. "He said I stayed with her that summer while you and Dad handled business." "What business?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had frozen. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Your father and we were having problems that summer. Serious problems. We thought it might be better if you weren't around while we tried to work things out." She paused, and I could see her struggling with something. "Elena she was our housekeeper's aunt. When Maria heard we needed somewhere for you to stay, she suggested Elena could watch you for a few weeks." "A few weeks? Mom, this album has hundreds of photos. This wasn't a few weeks." My mother's composure cracked entirely. "It was supposed to be 3 weeks, but then your father, he moved out. And I wasn't ready to have you come home to that mess. So you stayed longer." "How much longer?" "The whole summer. Nearly 4 months." 4 months of my 8-year-old life that had been erased through family conversations, photo albums, and holiday stories. 4 months with a woman who had apparently loved me so deeply that my image became synonymous with hope in an entire city. Why didn't you ever tell me about Elena, about what that summer meant? My mother's eyes filled with tears I'd never seen before. "Because when we brought you home, you cried for weeks. You kept asking when you could go back to your avó Elena. You kept saying you wanted to live with her instead of us." Her voice broke. "It was easier to help you forget." Chapter 4. Searching for Elena. I hung up on my mother for the first time in my life and walked the cobblestone streets of Alfama until my feet bled through my thin sneakers. The neighborhood felt familiar in a way that made my chest tight. Not the kind of familiarity that comes from visiting tourist sites, but the deep, bone-level recognition of a place where you'd once belonged. I found myself standing outside a small church, staring at an elderly woman selling flowers from a wooden cart. She wasn't Elena. This woman was too young, her face too unfamiliar. But something about her setup made my breath catch. The way she arranged the roses, the colorful blanket draped over her chair, the small ceramic dish for coins. "Disculpe," I said, using one of the few Portuguese words I remembered. "Do you know Elena? Elena who used to sell flowers here?" The woman's face softened with recognition and sadness. "Ah, Elena Rosa. She passed 5 years ago, querida. But you look familiar." She studied my face intently. "Wait, are you the menina? Elena's little buttercup?" Word spread through the neighborhood faster than I could have imagined. Within an hour, I was sitting in a tiny cafe surrounded by people who remembered me, who had stories about that magical summer I'd forgotten. There was Joao, who taught me to play football in the narrow streets, Maria Fernanda, who'd helped me learn Portuguese curse words that had scandalized Elena, Tomás, who'd been a teenager then, and remembered how I'd follow Elena everywhere like a devoted puppy. She talked about you until the day she died, Maria Fernanda told me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Every year on your birthday, July 15th, she would light a candle and wonder how you were growing up. She kept hoping you would come back. My birthday. Elena had remembered my birthday every year, while my own family needed reminders. She left something for you, Thomas said quietly. Elena, she always believed you would return someday. She made us promise to give it to you if you ever came back. He disappeared and returned with a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth by decades of handling. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that smelled like lavender and thyme, was a silver locket. When I opened it, I found a tiny photograph of Elena and me together, both of us covered in flour, laughing in what looked like a kitchen. On the opposite side, engraved in delicate script, were the words, "Para minha neta do coração," for my granddaughter of the heart.
Chapter 5. The Letter. That evening, I returned to Manuel's shop just as he was closing. He looked unsurprised to see me, as if he'd been expecting my return. "You found them," he said, noticing the locket around my neck. "Good. Elena would be happy." He paused, studying my face in the dying light filtering through his shop window. "There is something else, something Elena asked me to keep safe." From beneath his counter, he produced an envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with red wax. My name was written across the front in careful script, though it took me a moment to recognize it as Elena's handwriting. I had no conscious memory of ever seeing it before. "She gave this to me 10 years ago, when she got sick the first time. She said if you ever came back, I should give it to you. She said it would help you understand." My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. The letter inside was written in English, though I could see places where Elena had crossed out words, struggling to find the right translation for her feelings. "My dear Buttercup, if you are reading this, then God has answered my prayers and brought you back to Lisbon. I have missed you every day since your parents took you away. I need you to know the truth about that summer, mi amor. Your parents, they did not send you to me because they needed time alone. They sent you to me because your mama, she was very sick. Not sick in her body, but sick in her heart and mind. She could not take care of you. And your papa, he was scared. You saved me that summer as much as I saved you. My Jose had died, and I wanted to die too. Then this little angel appeared at my door, speaking broken Portuguese and asking if she could help me sell flowers. You gave me reason to wake up each morning. But more than that, menina, you saved your family. That summer apart, it gave your parents time to get your mama the help she needed. When they came to get you, your mama was better, stronger, ready to be your mama again. They asked me never to contact you, to let you forget about me, so you could be happy with them. I tried, mi amor, but a heart cannot forget love. I want you to know you were always important. You were the most important thing in the world. Con todo o meu amor, avó Elena.
Chapter 6. The Public Confrontation. I called my mother from the steps of the cathedral, where Elena used to sell flowers, the letter clutched in my free hand. This time, when her face appeared on my screen, I didn't give her a chance to deflect or minimize. "You lied to me," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet square. Several tourists looked over, but I didn't care. Elena didn't just watch me that summer, she saved me while you were falling apart. My mother's face crumpled, and for the first time in my life, she looked fragile. "How did you..." She left me a letter. She told me the truth about your depression, about Dad threatening to leave, about how you couldn't take care of me. Tears streamed down my face, but my voice grew steadier with each word. She told me how I saved your marriage by giving you space to heal. Sweetheart, please. No, Mom, you don't get to sweetheart me out of this. I stood up, pacing in front of the cathedral doors. Do you have any idea what it's been like growing up thinking I was just an afterthought in my own family? Thinking I was never important enough to remember or celebrate or include? My mother was crying openly now, her professional composure completely gone. We thought we were protecting you. We thought if you forgot about Elena, you'd be happier with us. But I wasn't happier. My voice cracked, echoing off the ancient stones around me. I spent my whole childhood feeling like something was missing, like I'd lost something I couldn't name. You took away the person who loved me most, and then you made me feel guilty for feeling empty. A small crowd had gathered, not tourists enjoying a show, but local residents who seemed to understand the gravity of what was happening. I saw Manuel among them, his eyes filled with the same protective concern I remembered seeing in Elena's photos. That woman loved me unconditionally, I continued, my voice breaking. She remembered my birthday every year while you needed calendar reminders. She kept hoping I'd come back while you all acted like that summer never happened. My mother's voice was barely a whisper through the phone speaker. We were scared we'd lose you to her. You loved her so much and we were jealous. You were selfish, and the truth of it hit me like a physical blow. You were selfish and you robbed me of 24 years with someone who saw me as the most important thing in the world. Chapter 7. The Second Twist. After I hung up, Manuel approached me carefully, the way you might approach a wounded animal. Menina, he said gently, there is something else Elena wanted you to know. Something she could not write in the letter. I looked up at him through my tears, exhausted from the emotional confrontation, but needing to hear whatever truth he was holding. Your parents, they did not just send you away that summer. They were going to give you up entirely, put you up for adoption. Your mama, she was so sick, she thought you would be better with another family. The world tilted around me. I gripped the cathedral steps to steady myself. Elena, she found out. She went to your parents and made them a deal. She said she would take care of you for as long as they needed, but only if they promised to get help and try to be a family again. She said every child deserves to be with their real parents if those parents are willing to fight for them. She saved my family? More than that, querida. She made your parents promise to love you better. She said if they brought you back to America, they had to make sure you knew every day how important you were. Manuel's voice grew sad. I think maybe they tried, but they were too scared of losing you to Elena's memory, so they tried to make you forget her instead. I thought about my childhood after that summer, how my parents had been more attentive, more careful with me, how they'd enrolled me in activities I loved, how they'd supported my dreams even when they didn't understand them. I'd always attributed it to natural growing up, but now I realized it had been Elena's influence, her final gift to me. She never stopped fighting for you, Manuel continued, even from across the ocean. She made them promise to send her school photos, report cards, anything to let her know you were growing up happy and loved. She had an entire album just of pictures of you growing up. She was so proud when you graduated university, so happy when you got your first job. She knew everything about your life, Menina, everything. The revelation knocked the breath out of me. While I'd been growing up feeling invisible, Elena had been watching from afar, proud of every milestone, celebrating every achievement. My parents had been sharing my life with her while simultaneously erasing her from mine. Chapter 8. The Album. Manuel led me to Elena's former apartment, now occupied by her great niece, Sophia, who had inherited not just the small space above the flower shop, but also Elena's treasure trove of memories. Sophia, a woman about my age, with Elena's same warm eyes, welcomed me like family returning from a long journey. Tia Elena talked about you so much, I felt like I knew you already, she said, leading me to a shelf lined with photo albums. She was so proud of you. Look. The albums were a chronicle of my entire life, from age 8 onward. School pictures, graduation photos, newspaper clippings from local achievements my parents had sent. But more than that, there were letters, dozens of letters I'd never seen, written in my mother's careful handwriting, detailing my milestones, my struggles, my dreams. Elena, one letter from when I was 16 read, Julia made honor roll again this semester, and she's been accepted to the National Honor Society. She wants to study literature in college. She says she wants to travel and write about the places she visits. I thought you'd want to know she still loves stories as much as she did that summer with you. Tia Mama, she wrote to Elena every few months, Sophia explained. Elena could not write back, but that was part of their agreement. But she could know about your life. She used to say it was like watching a flower grow from very far away. I found a letter from my college graduation. Elena, our Julia graduated summa cum laude yesterday. When she walked across that stage, I thought of you and how proud you would be. She's become such a strong, independent woman. I know you had a hand in shaping the person she became. She framed this one, Sophia said, showing me the letter. It hung above her bed until she died. There were photos, too. Pictures my parents had sent of family vacations, holidays, everyday moments I'd forgotten. But seeing them here in Elena's apartment made me realize they weren't just documentation of my life. They were love letters from Elena to me, a way for her to stay connected to the child who had saved her from grief and despair. She always said you would come back, Sophia whispered. She said some love is too strong to forget forever, even when people try to make you forget it. As I held the albums, I felt something shift inside me. The emptiness I'd carried my whole life wasn't just about feeling unimportant. It was about being separated from this unconditional love, this connection that had shaped me more than I'd ever realized. Chapter 9. Understanding the Postcards. The next morning, Sophia took me on a walking tour of Lisbon I never could have imagined. We started at the flower stand, where Elena used to work, now run by her cousin's daughter, who showed me the small memorial plaque installed after Elena's death. Elena Rosa, who taught us that love grows in the smallest acts of kindness. But it was our next stop that truly took my breath away. In a small community center in Alfama, Sophia showed me the wall of photos that had made me famous throughout the neighborhood. Picture after picture of 8-year-old me helping Elena, carrying flowers, arranging displays, sitting with elderly customers who had no one else to talk to. You started something that summer, Sophia explained. Elena said you taught her that helping people wasn't about grand gestures. It was about small kindnesses, daily choices to make someone's life a little brighter. The community center bore a plaque I hadn't noticed before. The Buttercup Project, in memory of Elena Rosa and in honor of the little girl who showed us that children can be teachers too. The postcards, Sophia continued. They started 5 years ago when Elena got really sick. The neighborhood wanted to raise money for her medical bills, but she refused charity. So someone had the idea to make postcards of that summer, you and Elena together, and sell them to tourists as a love story about Lisbon. We walked to 3 more shops, each carrying the postcards with my face, But now I could see they weren't just tourist kids. They were part of a neighborhood's way of honoring a woman who had spent decades caring for others, inspired by a summer with an American child who had shown her that love could heal grief. Elena never made money from the postcards, Sophia explained. All the proceeds went to help other elderly people in the neighborhood. She said it was what you would have wanted, to keep helping people even from far away. Standing in that community center, surrounded by photos of myself at 8 years old, I realized I hadn't just been important to Elena, I'd been important to an entire community. My small acts of kindness that summer had created ripples that were still spreading 24 years later. Every year on your birthday, Sophia said softly, Elena would donate money to the local orphanage in your name. She'd tell them it was from her granddaughter in America who taught her that every child deserves to feel important. The tears came then, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of connection I'd never felt before. I hadn't been invisible. I hadn't been unimportant. I'd been loved so deeply that it had transformed not just one woman's life, but an entire community's understanding of what it meant to care for each other. Chapter 10. The Final Twist. That evening, as I sat in my hotel room trying to process everything I'd learned, my phone rang. It was my father, something that happened maybe twice a year and never initiated by him. Your mother told me about your trip, he said without preamble. About what you found in Lisbon? Dad, I can't talk about this right now. I need to tell you something, Sarah. Something your mother doesn't know. His voice was strained in a way I'd never heard before. Elena didn't just save our marriage that summer. She saved my life. I sat up straighter, my heart beginning to race. The night before we were supposed to pick you up from Lisbon, I was going to kill myself. The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I had pills. I had a plan. I thought you and your mother would be better off without me. Dad! Elena called me that night. I don't know how she got our number, but she called. She said she'd been watching me during our visits to see you, and she could see the sadness in my eyes. She told me that you talked about me every day, about how much you loved your papa and couldn't wait to show me all the Portuguese words you'd learned. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, afraid I might miss something. She said you'd been planning a surprise for me. You'd learned to make this Portuguese dessert I'd mentioned liking, and you'd been practicing for weeks so you could make it for me when I came to get you. His voice broke. She said a little girl who loved her father that much deserved to have him fight to stay alive. I remembered that dessert now, pastel de nata, those little custard tarts. I remember standing on a chair in Elena's tiny kitchen, carefully following her instructions, determined to make them perfect for my father. I never made them for you, I whispered. You did, sweetheart. When we got to Lisbon to pick you up, you were so excited to show me what you'd learned. You made me a whole plate of those tarts, and they were terrible. Burned on the bottom, too sweet on top, but they were the most beautiful thing I'd ever tasted because my daughter had made them with love. I don't remember that. You were so nervous, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. You kept apologizing, saying they weren't as good as Elena's. But Julia, eating those imperfect little tarts with you in Elena's kitchen, seeing how proud you were, it was the moment I decided to live. For you. I was sobbing now, 24 years of confusion and pain pouring out of me. Elena saved all of us that summer. But you, Julia, you were the one who gave us all a reason to keep trying. You were never unimportant. You were the most important thing that ever happened to our family. Then why did you make me forget her? Because we were cowards, he said simply. We were afraid that if you remembered how much Elena loved you, you'd realize how badly we'd failed you before that summer. We thought if we could erase her, we could pretend we'd always been the parents you deserved. Chapter 11. The Reunion That Never Was. The next morning, Sophia took me to Elena's grave in the Prazeres Cemetery, a peaceful spot overlooking the city with a view of the Tagus River. Elena's headstone was simple marble, but it was covered with fresh flowers, not just from family, but from the entire neighborhood that had loved her. She's buried next to Jose, Sophia explained, but look at the dates. I studied the headstone and felt my heart break all over again. Elena had died on July 15, 2019, my 29th birthday. She'd held on just long enough to light one final candle for me, to spend one last birthday hoping I'd come home. The nurses said she'd been failing for weeks, but she kept saying she wasn't ready to go yet. She was waiting for something. On your birthday that year, she made us bring her to the window so she could look toward the airport. She said maybe this would be the year you'd surprise her. I knelt beside the grave, placing my hand on the sun-warmed marble. I'm so sorry, Avo Elena. I'm sorry I took so long to remember. I'm sorry I never came back. Sophia placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. She knew you'd come eventually. She used to say love like yours doesn't disappear. It just goes underground sometimes, like bulbs in winter, waiting for the right season to bloom again. As I sat there beside Elena's grave, I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood, the absolute certainty of being unconditionally loved. Elena's love for me hadn't diminished over the years or been damaged by my absence. It had remained constant, patient, eternal. There's something else, Sophia said, pulling an envelope from her purse. Elena left instructions for me to give this to you if you came after she was gone. The second letter was shorter than the first, written in shakier handwriting. My dearest Buttercup, if you are reading this, then I have already gone to be with Jose, but you have finally come home to Lisbon. I am not sad about this timing, but I have learned that love is not about being present in the same moment. It is about being present in the same heart. I want you to know that every day of my life after you left was made brighter by having loved you. You taught me that we do not need to share blood to be family, and we do not need to be together to be connected. I have one final gift for you, meu amor. In my jewelry box, Sophia will find the key to a safety deposit box at Banco Nacional. Inside, you will find all the money from your postcards, money that tourists paid because they were moved by our story of love. I saved every centime for you. Use it however your heart tells you, but know this: you are rich beyond measure, not because of money, but because you have the gift of making others feel important. That is the rarest gift in the world. Te amo para siempre. Avo Elena. P.S. Check the old olive tree behind my apartment. I left something there for you to find. Chapter 12. Coming Home. Behind Elena's former apartment, I found the ancient olive tree she'd mentioned in her letter. Carved into its bark, worn smooth by weather but still legible, were two sets of initials, ER plus JB. Underneath, in Portuguese, she'd carved Avó and Neta do Corazón, grandmother and granddaughter of the heart. Sophia and I retrieved the contents of Elena's safety deposit box together. Inside was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. 47,000 euros from 4 years of postcard sales. But more precious than the money were the items she'd saved. My hair ribbon from that last day together, a pressed flower from our walks, and a small notebook filled with Portuguese phrases she'd wanted to teach me if I ever came back. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. I used Elena's money to establish a foundation in her name, the Elena Rosa Foundation for Forgotten Children, designed to help kids who felt invisible, unimportant, or forgotten. The first project would be a scholarship program for children aging out of foster care, kids who needed someone to believe they were important. Sophia and I retrieved the contents of Elena's safety deposit box together. Inside was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. 47,000 euros from 4 years of postcard sales. But more precious than the money were the items she'd saved. My hair ribbon from that last day together, a pressed flower from our walks, and the small notebook filled with Portuguese phrases she'd wanted to teach me if I ever came back. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. I used Elena's money to establish a foundation in her name, the Elena Rosa Foundation for Forgotten Children, designed to help kids who felt invisible, unimportant, or forgotten. The first project would be a scholarship program for children aging out of foster care, kids who needed someone to believe they were important. Sophia agreed to run the Lisbon branch, and I knew I'd be back frequently to check on our work. For the first time in my adult life, I had a purpose that felt bigger than myself. On my last evening in Lisbon, I returned to Manuel's shop. He smiled when he saw me, and I could swear Elena's presence was there with us. "You look different," he observed. "You look like you remember who you are." I remember who I've always been. I just forgot for a while that being important isn't about being seen by everyone. It's about being loved completely by someone. I bought 20 postcards with my 8-year-old face on them, not as souvenirs, but as reminders. Each one would go to a different family member and friend, along with Elena's story and the truth about what it means to matter to someone. Flying back to America, I looked down at Lisbon growing smaller beneath the clouds and felt my heart expand instead of contract. I wasn't leaving home. I was carrying it with me. Elena's love, the neighborhood's kindness, Sophia's friendship, it was all part of who I was now. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We're proud of you for going to find her, sweetheart. We should have helped you remember Elena years ago. Can you forgive us?" I typed back, "Elena taught me that forgiveness is just love with a longer memory. Come to dinner Sunday. I have stories to tell you." As the plane carried me across the Atlantic, I realized that my family had been right about one thing. I was never that important in the way they measured importance. I was never the loudest voice or the most accomplished child or the most memorable presence. But I had been important in the way that truly mattered. I had been important enough to save a grieving woman from despair. Important enough to inspire a community to care for each other. Important enough to give my father a reason to live and my mother the space to heal. I had been important enough to be loved unconditionally by someone who saw past my quiet nature to the heart that wanted nothing more than to help others feel less alone in the world. That's the kind of important I want to be for the rest of my life. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered something about your past that changed how you saw yourself? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, only to realize later that you mattered more than you knew? I'd love to hear your stories of unexpected connections and rediscovered love. Don't forget to like this video if Elena's story touched your heart, and subscribe for more emotional travel stories that remind us we're all more important than we think we are.